In a way, Nebraska and Minnesota enter new eras for their programs, and it'll be fun to see what each of them can do. And they face off in week one, which is interesting for the Big Ten to schedule a game this early with everything in non-conference being so fun and so different. You have a conference game to start the year, which some people like, some people don't, but you get an early opportunity to showcase where your programs are compared to your fellow competition, your in conference, in division competition. So Matt Rule takes over for Nebraska, a program that struggled under Scott Frost. It's a new era for this team, and Matt Rule has a proven track record of turning around programs at Temple and at Baylor. So, what is he able to do to turn around Nebraska? This is a team that has talent. This is a team that is a fan base, really, that's longing for success, that's been hurting for a while now, and they think that they found their guy in Matt Rule. Will that actually happen? Not really sure, but this is a new era. It at least gives you something fresh instead of just hoping. You're having a different kind of hope, I guess, in a way where you have that positive outlook instead of just like a wait and see. Yeah, I think that you're still looking for this team to take a step forward, and maybe that's this year, maybe that's not. Maybe you need a year, but I think you're going to see a step this season. It's just a matter of how soon does that happen. Minnesota, in a way, is going through in transition as well. You lose Tanner Morgan. He finally runs out of eligibility, and now you move on to the Ethan Kaliakmanis era. But also, this offense is going through a transition where you lose quite a bit of talent at running back. You lose quite a bit of talent at wide receiver. But this is still a fun offense to watch. The defense, super underrated. I think Nebraska's defense is also super underrated. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. But still, two teams that enter new eras, two teams that are very much ready to take a step forward and show that they can still compete with everyone. Nebraska is looking to get back in the thick of things in the Big Ten West. Minnesota is just looking to navigate a pretty tough schedule. So that's one thing that we'll keep an eye on. Matt Rule's effect, obviously, on his program will be something to watch. And then PJ flexibility to elevate Minnesota, because I think the Minnesota is back to being an underdog once again, even after our 9-win season. I just don't think that people give them the respect that they deserve. And I think it's because most people don't really pay attention to Minnesota football. Partially don't blame them, but also I think this is a better team than people realize. And maybe even after the season, if they're not having the season that they want, this is still a more talented team than maybe the record indicates. Minnesota's had a couple of strong starts the last couple of years. Do you look at 2 years ago, their game against Ohio State, they gave Ohio State a run for their money. And then obviously Mo Ibrahim going down was a tough loss. Last year, they outscored their first four teams 183-24. Now, Nebraska is not some of those teams. You're not looking at Colorado. And I think that you're looking at a different type of a start. But Minnesota, the last couple of years, I think has figured some things out in week one. They are playing free, they're playing fast. And that's something that a lot of teams don't do. You get teams and players that are uptight because they're not sure it's a new start. But Minnesota has done a great job of playing free and playing confidently. And that will help, especially if their quarterbacks are able to do that, because there are two quarterbacks that are taking over as first time starters for these programs. And Jeff Sims started at Georgia Tech, but now he is looking to run a Nebraska team to new heights. And are hoping that he can take off as a passer. And we'll dive into that a little bit more later, but he is someone that has an NFL future. And the other guy that we're not talking about, I think outside of the Minnesota circles, you're not really discussing him as an NFL player, is Ethan Kaliakmanis. He's another player with good talent, good size, good ability, good tools, someone who you definitely need to pay attention to a little bit more if you're not already. I think the biggest question for Minnesota is this defense legit because they were top 10 in scoring and yards. Now, you can't just take a stat and just say, oh, this team was elite because they only gave up this many points. Part of that is looking at your schedule and who you played. Certain teams like Colorado obviously struggled mightily last year. So you can't really say, oh, well, Minnesota's a dominant team because they dominated Colorado. But I also think on the same hand, that can be true. Two things can be true at the same time. That can be true, but also this could be an underrated defense, an underappreciated defense, because again, people don't pay attention to Minnesota football. People do not, outside of the Big Ten, I would say. people do not know what Minnesota football is all about. And Nebraska knows that, and they're looking to remind people of what Nebraska football is all about. And I think that that defense, like I said before, that defense as well is underrated. I think they have a lot of talented players. They have a good core returning of experience, and it's just a matter of finding ways to bring your team to new heights because you're looking at two teams that have plenty of motivation and plenty of ability to get where they want to go. It's just a matter of putting that all together. We talked about the quarterbacks. We'll dive into them here. Jeff Sims has all the tools to be a first round pick. It's just a matter of the consistency and the ball security and the decision making. I think that when you look at his running ability, obviously that adds to his excitement, that adds to his stock, but the consistency as a passer just hasn't been there. Now, in defense, he's been playing on Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech hasn't exactly been a solid team for a while, ever since Paul Johnson left. And that was something that he obviously wanted to get away from. He obviously needed a new start, and now you get that with Nebraska, and maybe Matt Rule's able to take him to a different. On the other side, I think Cali McManus is a really exciting player. If you go back and watch some of the throws he made at Penn State, and you look at some of the throws he made against Wisconsin, this is a guy who can sling it. This is a super talented player that if you don't know his name now, you better get on board because he will be a big time name when it's all said and done. He has all the tools to be big time. He has all the tools to get everyone's attention. And if anything, when we go from Tanner Morgan, who was that reliable player, that leader, and you go to a guy like Alec Manis who can maybe make a few more throws than Morgan can make, you're going to get some eye-popping numbers. You're going to get some highlight reel throws, and then you're going to be talking about him in a different light too. And he's just under the radar because he didn't start last year. He didn't, I guess, necessarily have a lot of people paying attention to his game. So now he gets a chance to show that everyone needs to pay attention and give him the respect that he deserves. This is a really intriguing game because there's so many different factors and there's a lot of new faces that will contribute too. We talked about a good core for each side, but for the most part, the guys that might make the biggest impact are the new faces to each team. And we talked about the quarterbacks, the pass catchers for Minnesota. Yes, Chris Bell is back. Daniel Jackson returns, but you also get Corey Crooms coming in from Western Michigan. You get Elijah Spencer from Charlotte. Tight end Brevin Spanford returns, and I think that he has first round potential. I think a lot of people agree with that. He is someone that will definitely make an impact. On Nebraska side, Anthony Grant could be one of the best running backs in college football. Billy Kemp, super underrated, coming in from Virginia, a great slot pass catcher. And then I think a guy, if he is eligible, I think that they're still working on some things, is Eric Gilbert. If he, the former LSU and Georgia transfer, if he is eligible to play and all good and whatever was going on off the field, and he's back to where he needs to be, to where he can compete on the field, he will be a special talent for this team. It's just a matter of there's a lot of factors that go into that, but I really like what he can do. I think that he's a special player. He's a special talent. And I really hope for his sake that he can just get back on the field, do what he does, and it'll be fun to see how much damage he can do in the Big Ten. Minnesota and Nebraska, like I said, entering new eras, looking to make some noise. And they get things started in week one with a matchup that maybe gets them up to speed and gets them into midseason form, maybe a little bit earlier than expected. But this is a game that is a big one for both of them, and a win here would do a lot for both of these programs.